Prop 3. We are live. Michael. We're live, Gabe.
Perfect. So I guess, would you like to kick us off, Miss Jackie, or you want me to go ahead and get us in here?
You can go on and kick us off.
Okay, cool. So I guess for anybody watching, my name is Gabe Jones, and I am a proud Russell neighborhood resident. I personally think that Russell is one of the coolest, most beautiful neighborhoods in the Best End. We got a lot of good ones, but I'm very fond of Russell myself. And I'm just grateful, first of all, for RPOP, Russell A Place of Promise, and the Center for Neighborhoods for allowing me to share this space today on behalf of myself and my community. Because just as a brief aside, I have attended a lot of RPOP and Center for Neighborhood events. So I kind of feel like a celebrity right now that I'm like a part of it, and I'm on the stream, like I'm on TV low key. So I'm out here. But yeah, I'll pitch it to Michael and Jason for you all to just introduce yourselves.
All right, so I am Michael Forbush. I am the Education and Engagement Director for the Center for Neighborhoods. I've been at the Center for Neighborhoods for about 5 years now. And I am in charge of the team that goes out into neighborhoods and talks to residents and try to assist them in making their neighborhoods a better place.
And good evening, everybody. I am Jason Webb. I serve as the Community and Technical Assistance Principal here at Grounded Solutions Network. We are the TA provider that is going to be working with residents on possibly creating a new community land trust in the Louisville area. So we know that Russell has had some conversations, and I'm looking forward to this conversation tonight. You're on mute, Gabe.
Oh shoot, most basic rules. So I saw Teresa hopped on, and I also see we got the mayor, Miss Jackie, still here. Miss Jackie, is there anything you'd like to say as an intro?
I would just like to say that Russell's the best neighborhood in the country, and I'm a proud Russell resident.
That's it. I love it. You got anything for us, Teresa, before we kick this thing off?
Just happy to be here, Gabe, and I've got this sweet little puppy that wants to bite my face off, so we're gonna hope to dodge that. Well, ow, we're in this call. She's still working on it.
Yeah. So for anybody who thought that this stream wasn't gonna have everything, we got puppies, y'all. We got puppies. We got everything you need here today. So yeah, Jason, I think maybe we have a video to kick it off. So I'll just toss it over to you.
Yeah, thank you. So where we want to start off is just giving folks a quick 1 minute of what is a community land trust so that we can start from that basic knowledge.
Community land trusts, or CLTs, are nonprofit organizations that acquire, own, and steward land permanently for the common good. The most common CLT land use is housing, but retail, office, and a variety of other uses are possible. CLTs give formal decision-making voice and power to local community residents in determining land uses. Here's how CLTs make home buying affordable for families in their communities. First, the CLT builds or buys homes using one-time public or private investment. Next, the CLT sells just the home to a low-income buyer who qualifies for a mortgage, and the CLT keeps the land, holding it in trust for future generations of home buyers. In return for being able to buy a home at a discounted price, the family agrees to pay it forward and sell to another low-income family at a price they can afford. The CLT manages the sales process, ensuring that each home buying family builds some wealth from a predetermined limited amount of the sales proceeds. In this way, the one-time public or private investment in CLT homes makes lasting affordability a reality and stabilizes communities. And CLTs benefit the larger community too, as they preserve and protect housing for long-term residents, helping to build stronger, safer, and higher quality diverse neighborhoods, contributing to greater educational attainment, employment opportunities, and health outcomes. Visit groundedsolutions.org to learn more about CLTs today.
So the great thing about this model of a community land trust is that one, it's a 50-year-old model. So this is not something that we thought about last week and said, hey, let's bring it to, Louisville. So this has been around for 50 years. This model was actually created and actually inspired by civil rights activists and leaders out of the South that really wanted to gain more ownership of land and actually do it in a collective manner so that it can actually be protected and actually preserved for the longest term. So I'm looking forward to some great questions tonight and for some great dialogue on how this model here can possibly continue to help the Russell community grow and sort of aspire to where it wants to be.
Wonderful. So Jason, I'm just gonna get right to it because if I'm not good at anything else, I can ask some questions. Right. So I think the place that I would like to start on behalf of just myself, my block, my neighborhood, I think that in this city and in the United States, there is a history of very intentional, harmful policy and practice that has been perpetrated on Black communities. And I think as a result of that, folks in my neighborhood and people like myself are understandably skeptical of new initiatives that come and say, hey, this is gonna help your community, because history has taught many of us that that's not how it works out. So what would you say to folks in my neighborhood that are skeptical of this for those reasons?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would say continue to be skeptical, and your skepticism should put you into a place where this model here can only succeed if you get involved. That, this model here is community driven. It needs to be community controlled. And excuse me, that's one of the things about the founders of this model, is that they wanted to make sure that they gave power back to folks that were sort of put off to the edges and sort of, not made a part of any of the decision-making systems out there. That they created a model around land control, because we all know that with land control equals power. So each individually, we can always go out and try to get land and get buildings on our own and try to get power individually. But this model here talks about an entire community taking power together and actually creating something that can actually be a lot more powerful than any single individual. And that's what's the beautiful thing about this model here. So for me, I say to anybody, continue to be skeptical. Continue to do your research, continue to look out at the other 300 community land trusts throughout the country. Test them, see if they have actually improved their communities or not. But then at the same time, you got to get involved. So then you can actually, see how this power is actually going to be put out there by your own decisions that you as a community can make. You're on mute, Gabe, again.
So one thing you said actually led to another question that I had, is, are there successful examples of CLTs in predominantly Black neighborhoods around the United States? And if so, are there specific things that made those things successful? And how should we think about applying those to Russell and to the West End possibly?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So because this model has been around for 50 years, there are plenty of different examples, specifically also in Black communities. Because again, with this model coming out of civil rights activists saying, hey, we need to give power back to our people that are in these cities that are literally being driven out. How can we actually do that? So here are a few examples. One is in Durham, North Carolina. And it's the Durham Community Land Trustees. You know, they've been around for 30 plus years, have over 200 plus units. And the biggest success that they've been able to do is continue to keep that community intact and affordable, because that's something that they've been really successful in doing, is not allowing for residents to be pushed out due to higher rents or due to higher property taxes. That they've been able to use their community land trust to go in and actually acquire a number of parcels, build housing, and actually transform their community. The community that I grew up in Boston, Massachusetts, in the communities of Roxbury and Dorchester, is another great example of a community land trust that literally had to take half of the community under its own control. This community basically had a 60-acre area where half of that land was left vacant and abandoned for many years. And it was basically arson for profit. It was around the same time that white flight was happening in those communities. And that community was literally burnt to the ground. The community finally rose up and said, you know what, we're not gonna have anybody come in and save us. We need to save ourselves. And they started organizing themselves and created a community land trust and started to go after all of those vacant parcels. Now today they have over close to 300 units of affordable housing, and they've also been able to do other things on their community land trust, like doing a community park, like doing some commercial space, like doing a industrial greenhouse. So those are two great examples of specifically Black neighborhoods that this community land trust has been able to go into and has been able to transform those communities for the better. For Dudley Street, where I grew up, the biggest thing that we got as a community, we got additional resources coming in to make sure that as the houses were going up, the sidewalks were all being redone, all the streets were being redone, a lot of those public parks were being rehabbed. So we got additional resources into our community because the city and the policymakers started to realize, oh, wait a minute, that community that we wrote off is actually coming back to life. So we better put some money in there to make it more attractable. But they didn't understand that our community was creating affordable housing. So it wasn't like they can actually bring those investments in and actually push people out, which is their classic, formula that they love to do. They love to improve areas, and by improving it, you increase the values. And unfortunately, because you increase those values, it pushes people out. That's why having a community land trust at this stage, I believe in the Russell community, might be really, really pivotal, because we're already seeing a lot of investment come into Russell, and we want to make sure that we're protecting the community.
And let me add on to that, Gabe. So one of the pushes that Center for Neighborhoods really wants to put forth is the idea of community controlled development, right? A community land trust will allow residents, will allow you and the folk who live around you to decide what development looks like in your neighborhood. You all will be able to leverage the types of houses, who goes into those houses, and really create a stable platform for the people that live there now, right? So a lot of the development that's going on and has gone on in the past really hasn't had any resident input. You now have the chance to not only give input, but to be the decision-making, excuse me, the decision-making group on development. And for us, that really amplifies the power of the individuals who live in Russell. Because we know the individuals who live in Russell now are powerful. This will amplify that power. And just like Jason talked about, you'll be able to leverage more development and bring in other resources to the neighborhood that you decide that you want.
So thank you all for answering those questions. So as I think about my neighborhood very specifically, and my block even more specifically, like right now, I have neighbors on my block that have been renters in their current spots for 20 years, some for 25 years. And so I'm curious to know, because from my perspective, we cannot lose them. They can't get pushed out. So I'm glad you all talked about that, because they are why I love Russell, and they are why this neighborhood is great. And so I'm curious if you could speak kind of directly to them or to people like them, and to give them a reason to be hopeful about a community land trust coming to this neighborhood.
Yeah, so when I was doing my first 36 units of CLT home ownership, one of the things that the homebuyer counselors always used to say is that if I'm a renter and if I've been paying my rent faithfully year after year, why in the world would a bank not want to give me a mortgage? Because I already know that I can actually pay that rent. And in some places, the rent can be just as much as a mortgage payment. Why isn't that a good deal? And the great thing about a community land trust is that you have an agency that is going to be set up to help you, support you, also be a safety net for you, just in case if you do fall, that you don't hit the ground and have to start over from day one. That you actually have an agency that is ready to help you, whether you want to go into home ownership or whether you want to stay a renter, that this organization here is going to be able to create those different mechanisms to help protect you. And the reason why is because you as a resident and your fellow residents are going to be the decision makers. We're not going to need any outside investor to sort of make that call. The residents and your neighbors are going to be making the calls as to, hey, are we going to prioritize the existing residents to make sure that those individuals stay in our community? And if that's a priority, then that's where the community land trust can go ahead and deploy its resources. But this is the thing about Russell that a lot of folks don't know. About half of the community is owned by investors. They own that rental property that, Gabe, you're talking about. They have those investments going. They know that they make about $1 million a year just on renting out that property, because that property's been already paid off. That property was paid off 10 years ago. And right now, investors are just making these transactions and saying to each other, hey, you want to make $1 million? Buy this property. We got these long-term renters. They're going to keep renting, and you can just pocket the money. This is what's happening in too many of our communities. And that's why this model here, I feel, from my experience, has been quite successful in going in and taking some of those properties and acquiring them from the investors and giving them back to the community. Because again, far too long, we've had outsiders try to come into our community and tell us what we need. You guys already know what you need. You guys just need some of the tools to put it into place. And that's where I'm hoping that more folks are going to say, this is the model we need. We're ready to step up. Let's go. Let's get this done. Because at Grounded Solutions Network, we're ready to help.
So let me add on to that and real quickly kind of give a brief overview of how we got here. So when COVID kind of popped off, everybody knows that the government was throwing money at poor people left and right. One of the things that they did was they provided community block grant funding specifically for housing to Louisville. What Louisville decided to do was to use part of that community block grant funding that the government, that HUD gave us, for community land trust. And what that looks like now is that there is a block of money sitting, waiting for residents to come together, form the land trust, and start the work, right? So right now, the plan is for us to find residents to come together to form the land trust. These residents, and then all of the residents within the Russell neighborhood, will be the decision-making body. They will decide how that money is deployed. They will also decide, when Jason talked about mechanisms as far as keeping folk in their rentals, they will develop those mechanisms, right? So you all have the ability to say, all right, we want to keep these specific renters in their homes. How do we do that? We will provide the technical assistance. Jason and some other folk will provide the technical assistance for you to make the decision on how that gets done. The funds are there. What we need is residents to come together and form the group to implement the actual CLT, to form the community land trust that's going to do the work to ensure that Russell residents remain and ensure that affordable housing is directly built by Russell residents.
I wanted to try to be mindful and make sure that I'm not monopolizing the time. Teresa, were there some specific questions that we might want to inject here from Facebook?
There are so many great questions going on the Facebook right now. I can hardly keep up. Some of them I posted in the Zoom chat. So one question is about making sure that there's a plan to create a solid plan to make sure the trust is truly for residents. And I think y'all have done a great job of answering that. And then the other question that came up related to that is, how can private citizens mobilize to take advantage of the community land trust opportunity? Is credit score or learning or education provided? And what is the plan to make sure that the benefits of a land trust are truly accruing to Russell residents? And then there are lots of questions about like technical stuff.
I'm going to answer the first part of that, and then I'll let Jason kind of wrap up the credit score and all of that.
Super.
So the way that individuals interact with the land trust is to essentially show up. That is all we need. We need you to show up and to voice what you need and to participate in the group, right? And that's all that's all you have to do, right? We will assist in the organizing. We've been knocking on doors. We will continue knocking on doors. We will continue doing flyers. We will continue doing these meetings. We're going to provide some training. Jason is going to provide some training. We're going to give you all the tools that we have in order for the land trust to be successful, right? And success really looks like what you all think success is. Our success is some affordable housing. That is what we would consider success, right? Everything else is up to you. If the neighborhood as a whole decides, well, we want affordable housing, we want rentals, and that's what you say success is, that is success. We will provide every tool possible for you to get there, right? But it takes an organized group to do that. And we will do everything within our power to get the neighborhood organized. We will work with RPOP, we will work with the neighborhood association. We've talked to as many churches as we can. We've talked to small businesses. We are trying to talk to everybody. 6 feet away because of COVID, but we are doing our best. Jason, did you want to handle the credit score and the rest of that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I also want to drill down a little bit more in terms of ensuring that this is resident control, is that with inside the bylaws and the articles that are going to create this CLT, there are specific places where residents are going to have to be members. Residents are going to have to sit on the board of directors. Residents are going to have to participate. And those things are going to be written in those organizational documents to ensure that, again, this is community control. Now, in terms of what do residents need to do to be able to, truly see some of these benefits? Well, when it comes to home ownership, you personally have to just get yourself ready. The community land trust is going to be able to do one thing, and that is it's going to be able to lower the cost of the house to a level that you can afford. But for you to afford it does not mean that you cannot think that you can ignore that we're going to have to go out and get you a mortgage to be able to buy this house, which means that, yes, your credit score is going to need to be at a certain level, that you're going to need to go through a home buyer education course. All of these things, again, the community land trust, along with its partners, because a community land trust cannot do this stuff alone. It's going to take partnerships. It's going to take figuring out who else do we want as a community partner with to be able to get to this success. And that, you as an individual are going to need to make sure that you're ready for this journey as well, in making sure that you're ready to go through this process. But right now, we have not been successful in getting a mortgage company to say, oh, credit scores we don't have to worry about. Oh, we can give a mortgage to anybody. Unfortunately, that's not where we are yet. That's where we hope to be someday, but that's not where we are yet. Where we can be is a place where you don't have to put a lot of money down as a down payment to be getting into one of these homes. The other thing is that you may not need to bring a lot of money to the closing table to deal with closing costs. Because again, we may have partners that we can leverage to bring additional funds to the table to cover some of those costs. But again, a lot of this stuff, we need to be in dialogue with the residents and the CLT board and members to know exactly where you want to go. I can talk about where CLTs elsewhere have been, but I need to know, where does Russell want to go? And then we can start to massage it and start to get it to a place where we're on the path to actually get to where we all want to go.
So, Teresa, should I pick up with another one, or you think you want to shoot a couple more from Facebook?
I think so. Let me go through some of the comments for you guys so that you can understand where the conversation is going. So there are lots and lots of comments about and questions about what kinds of properties are able to go into a community land trust. So questions about, can a land trust take on commercial property, which we know that they can. Could a land trust take on cooperatively owned property, which I suspect the answer is yes. There are also questions about partnerships. So can residents be investors? I suspect the answer to that one is also yes, but if y'all want to jump in on that, that's great. And then another really good question is, are there opportunities for other community organizations that already have resident involvement to get involved in learning and being part of this discussion? And I think the answer to that one is the more the merrier. Jump on in. So that's sort of the direction that the Facebook is going in tonight. And then there's some questions in here too about how, do we need private funders for this? Then there are also comments about everybody's goal isn't home ownership. That's a great one, that affordable rentals are also really important. And maybe you all can talk a little bit about how a community land trust could operate in that space too. I'm really excited about the discussion that's happening on Facebook. There's a lot going on here. I almost can't keep up.
I mean, that's great to hear. The one thing that I've always said to everybody that wants to think about a community land trust, anything you can do on real estate, you can do with inside of a community land trust. Because when you strip apart even the real estate functions, it's about decision making. This model here is truly about who gets to decide on what development happens in a community. And the great thing is that this model here says the community should be the one making that decision. And that's one of the things that, you know, for myself, I've been able to do commercial. I've been able to do rental. I've been able to do open space, parks, even a commercial 10,000 square foot greenhouse I've put onto a community land trust. Because it doesn't really matter what the mold of the real estate is. It all depends on who gets to make those decisions. So for my community in Dudley Street, they were really big on urban agriculture. And that's why we got a 10,000 square foot commercial greenhouse, is because the community said, that's what we want. And the CLT said, okay, we got to figure out a way to make that happen. And it was a part of getting private funders, public funders, getting the federal government involved, getting state government involved, getting all your funding partners to work together. Because again, once the community starts to coalesce around a design and around a vision for what they want, the CLT just needs to bring that vision to the table and say to these policymakers and these folks that sort of have the keys to the checkbook, hey, this is the vision. How much are you in for? Because we're going to keep it controlled by the community. We're going to keep it up, and we're going to make sure that nothing happens to it. So you have us as a permanent partner at the table as the community. How much are you investing in this? And you know what we have seen nationally and in a lot of other communities is the fact that those policymakers will start writing checks because they want their name on these sort of successes. For us at Grounded Solutions Network, we do a lot of federal advocacy. So we're working right now with, while the Build Back Better plan has sort of stalled, inside that plan, there was a $500 million cutout set aside for community land trust. We've never been able to get to that level in the past, 50 years that this model has been around. We are going to continue to push that model and continue to push that 500 million until it can get into another bill. And then it can be deployed into the country to support CLTs like the one possibly in Russell for a lot of your projects. The other great thing that we have seen is that the city has already put up money. They're already they're one of the first ones in. They're like, hey, we're going to give residents control. We're also going to give them money so that they can actually put some things into place. They need to step up. And that's sort of the challenge, is that we got the money. We need the residents to step up, and we feel like we got a good model. So I think that there's a lot of possibility here around sort of what you can do with the community land trust and how we can sort of deploy it with inside Russell and also bring all the partners together.
That's awesome.
So
I got, sorry. I got to follow up on that, but if you want to go first.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about what the leadership of a CLT looks like, right? So the leadership of a CLT is a tripartite leadership. And what that looks like is that residents who live in CLT houses sit at the top of this decision-making model, right? So individuals who are in CLT houses make the first decision and one of the final decisions around how the CLT operates. The next group is the neighborhood as a whole, right? So you have individuals who are living in CLT houses, and then you have all of the residents within the neighborhood. These two groups make a majority of the decisions around the operation and how the CLT actually functions. So if these two groups say that we want more rentals, we want to be able to provide folk with stable and safe rental properties, that's what the CLT does. The third group are the advisors, right? these organizations are the ones that provide the technical assistance to make sure the CLT has longevity. But Jason can correct me if I'm wrong, they don't have a vote in the operation of the CLT. They're strictly advisors, right? So by one, keeping residents as the primary decision makers, that is how the CLT maintained its vision that comes from the individuals that live in the neighborhood. So I wanted to address that specifically, right? That it is the vision of the individual and collective residents that move the CLT forward. That is the decision making that happens within the CLT, right? The other thing that I wanted to talk about is that metro government and state government, aside from the policies that they have put in place, do not have input in how the CLT runs aside from the policies that they put in place, right? So metro government will not be within the decision making of the CLT. Residents are the ones who will be making all of the decisions, right? So I just wanted to make that clear that a majority of the CLT decision-making group, almost all of those, are individuals who live in Russell currently and hopefully in the future, right? And this is how you can maintain control over the CLT. This is how you can maintain control over the development that happens in the neighborhood. I'm sorry, Teresa, go ahead.
No, Michael, that was awesome. And that is a great segue to the question that I was going to ask following up from Jason. I wonder if you guys can make it super concrete. So all of what you just talked about is exactly on point of what the questions that we're seeing in Facebook are asking about how to operationalize it. How do you make a land trust exist in ways that are really, really attuned to what residents are asking for? And the one example that I can think of lots of examples, but one example that keeps coming up for me in answering that question is how the Dudley Street Neighborhood Association came to be. And Jason, I know you are super involved in that. And I wonder if you can tell us the story of how residents came together to create that now very robust organization that's starting to take on even more amazing work in the Dudley Street neighborhood. Because I think that story really helps to explain it in some tangible ways about how land trusts are created for community and by community, and are really sort of created with this idea of community-centered, community-first operations.
Yeah, no, I mean, so my community sort of growing up, we basically had half of our community vacant. It wasn't even like it was abandoned buildings. We're talking about abandoned land. So, you know, for me going to school every day, I used to walk by large piles of trash because at night, since there was nobody around, it was just vacant land. Contractors would come and just dump their loads on the vacant parcels. So the community at a certain point just got tired of it and said, you know what, we need to start organizing. We need to start coming out with a community vision, a community plan for what we're going to do with all of these vacant lots. They organized, they did a number of community meetings, a number of visioning sessions to come up with a concrete plan. And they came up with this concrete housing plan and other amenities. And then they said, okay, how do we get control of this land? And they said, how can we all collectively think about going after all of these parcels? Can we pool resources and we go out and we buy land? And we actually had one of the founders of the CLT model, you know, Bob Swan, come and do a presentation in front of the community. And he talked about the elements. And he talked about the idea that residents are the ones that are the decision makers. You're not looking at outsiders. You're not looking even at the city to make decisions on what happens in your community. They're going to be funding it, but you should be deciding on what actually gets implemented. So with that plan, we started to put together our community land trust, and we started to go after very large pots of money to go ahead and acquire property. So we went to the Ford Foundation, national organization, and said, hey, can we get a $2 million loan from you at 1% interest so that we can actually go and purchase all of this land? And it took about 6 months to a year of negotiating and convincing them that, hey, we had a good plan and that we can actually do this. And they went ahead and they gave us the $2 million. And one of the things we started to do is acquire property. And the moment we started to acquire property, we started to realize, wait a minute, there's other investors trying to also buy property. So we actually took the unprecedented step and actually asked the city to give us the power eminent domain to actually go ahead and acquire private parcels of land, because we understood that we needed as a community to get control of as much land in our own community. There were a few rules. We weren't going to go after private land that was resident owned. We were looking at private land that was owned by outsiders that have not taken care of our property. And we started to, acquire large parcels of land through that mechanism. And we had the funding, and then we started to build homes. And all throughout this process, we made sure that we were constantly going back to the community, even down to how many bedrooms should we be building? Do we want to do 2? Do we want to do 3? How big of a house do we want? Do we want big backyards? Do we want off-street parking? All of these things that are usually decided by professionals somewhere else are now actually decisions that community residents are coming together and actually debating and talking about, and then collectively coming up with a consensus-based model to make a decision and move forward. So our community land trust has been around for about 32 years. We have done everything that you could think of with real estate on it, to the idea of when we talk about rental and we talk about how do community land trusts be in this space of rental, one of the things that community land trusts are known for is home ownership. But a number of CLTs also have to do rental, because we understand that there is a continuum of need for individuals. Not everybody wants to be a homeowner. And in some ways, not everybody should be a homeowner because of their lack of resources to just keep up with a house. But they should all have the ability to have a safe, secure, affordable house to call home. And that's something that the community land trust can actually bring to bear. And that's something that we've been successful at. A number of other CLTs have been successful at creating rental opportunities, and even rental and lease to own opportunities for individuals that may be like, you know what, I'm not quite ready now to actually buy a home straight out. My credit's not there. I just don't have the savings. But is there a way I can get into a rent to own situation? Again, CLTs have been able to do that as well. So again, I think I always throw it back to the community and the residents to come up with the ideas, come up with the vision of where you want to go, and then bring in, professionals like myself that can actually help you guys and show you guys the different tools that we have in our toolbox to be able to make it happen and make it a reality. But for the Dudley Street community, right now we're close to 300 units of housing. We have rental, we have cooperatives, and we have home ownership in terms of the 3 housing styles that we have. We are going to be going into a development of tiny homes as a transitional space for folks that are currently homeless, to get them into the queue for rentals. So that's something that is on the horizon for that community land trust. And it's something that other CLTs have already done throughout the country, is also take on tiny homes as a part of the housing continuum to make sure that communities have choice as to where they want to live and how they want to live.
That was super helpful. Thank you for that.
So one thing that is coming up for me as we talk about this, so we've talked a lot about the community and people from the neighborhood being a part of it and having a voice and getting to make decisions. But I guess on a more fundamental level, for anybody like me who's thinking about, all right, if I want to be on this board, what does it mean to actually be on the board? How do I do that? What does the time commitment look like? Because if anybody is listening to this and they're like me, they got a lot going on. So what are sort of the nuts and bolts of actually being on the board?
So I will start this off because we're going to be handling the first part of it. And I'm not going to lie, being on the board will be actual work, right? So the first phase of this is developing an organization, right? So you as residents are going to sit down together. We're going to provide training as needed. We're going to give all the tools that we have to make sure you're successful, but you're going to create bylaws. You're going to figure out the structure. You're going to do everything that you normally would to create a nonprofit, right? And then once you're able to officially register with the Secretary of State, then we will work with the group to get the 501c3. That is when the organization is official and takes the fund, right? That is when you will receive the funds that CBDG thing that's from HUD. That's when the organization will really start to do work. Then the organization, residents, will continue to put in work and make larger decisions around staffing, around it will be actual work. So I do not want to discourage anybody from participating, but I don't want anybody to come into this with blinders, right? A community land trust will transform Russell, but it will not transform Russell without the work of the individuals who are living there now. Jason, you want to pick up the second part of that?
Yeah, so I mean, you're hitting on all of the great sort of, we're going to be creating a new nonprofit. We have to figure out the business plan. We have to figure out where this organization is going to go, and that's going to take residents. And the great thing is that we have the expertise to be able to get this done, as long as residents continue to want to stay engaged and actually bring their best thinking to the table. I always like to say that in terms of timeline, that it takes what it takes, but we also have to realize that money is literally sitting and it can be deployed, a lot faster as residents come together and they can actually make those decisions necessary for us to get to a place where we can actually start to deploy it in the community. So for me, it's one of those things where I have been working in so many different cities. And one example that I will give is like Detroit. 10 years ago, I was in Detroit and I tried to talk to them about a community land trust. They all looked at me and they said, we don't need a community land trust. Nobody wants to live here. We're broke. The city's broke. We're bankrupt. There's no need for affordability. Every place is affordable. 10 years goes by and they're calling me saying, hey, can you come back? There are certain communities in Detroit where we're being priced out and we're actually being pushed out now. And that's only 10 years. So for me, that's a classic example of that, the present is now to start to get this done, because the more that you wait, the smaller chunks of Russell is going to start to slip away. Any property that is currently on the market now, if we can't get that under community control, it's just going to go to an investor. And if it goes to an investor, you guys are going to have practically no say in what happens to that property. If you can put it into the community land trust, then you guys can have all the say in terms of what you want to do with that property. So I don't ever like to rush folks, but I do like to say, if you wait too long, you will unfortunately may lose large parts of your community, because we've seen it in other places in the country.
So once someone's on the CLT board, are they committing to a certain period of time, or is that sort of an infinite commitment, or until they get tired? How does that work?
Yeah, so I think as we sort of create the organization, we're going to talk through what are term limits. We all understand that we have all lived through flawed democratic systems. And one of the things that the CLT will give us the ability to do is actually put some certain protections in that are not currently in those other democratic systems that we all know about. So, I've seen CLTs that say, listen, the initial term of the board is probably going to be up to 2 years. Because for 2 years, that gives you guys a good sort of runway to make the certain decisions that are necessary and start working on your first project together. And then from there, then you start doing a transition. But again, it's not a wholesale thing. It's not like all of the board members are going to term off in the same way. That we can stagger those terms for individuals, where if somebody wants to come in, they say, listen, I only want to do a year. We can be like, all right, cool. We're gonna give you a 1-year term. You can be here, and after that 1 year, if you want to re-up, we're going to give you the ability to re-up, but we're also going to limit you where you can't do more than 2 terms. So again, there's definitely different ways we can structure this. And again, I put it back to the community. Which way do you want to do it? We know from best practices that we don't want to give founding board members a 10-year term. That's not going to be helpful. But we know that, having founding board members be there for more than a year is going to be important, because they're going to, be pivotal of talking to other residents, getting a feel for where people want to be. And then also the community land trust is going to need to start hosting larger community conversations about bigger decisions. When you think about a community land trust, you think about how do we get to a place where we can actually allow for wealth creation to happen inside that community land trust. That's a large conversation to happen, not just with board members, but with community members. And that's something that this initial board is going to be starting to do. So I think, as what was talked about, you're going to be doing real work. We're going to keep it fun. We're going to try to keep it light. We've done this, I've personally have looked over 50 CLT creations in the 5-6 years I've been here at Grounded Solutions Network. So we have a pretty good system, but it just means the involvement and the attention for residents to keep staying involved. Bring your best thinking. If you don't know something, that's fine. We're all going to learn.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like that definitely enhanced my understanding. So at least for now, I have just a couple more questions. I'm trying to be mindful of the time and Facebook. But if I've been to plenty of RPOP meetings. I've been to Center for Neighborhoods meetings, neighborhood association stuff. I love it all. So if I am one of the OGs of the Russell neighborhood and I already have a home, what stake or incentive do I have to get involved in this thing?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think one of the biggest incentives is the fact that you're going to come into a space where you're going to collectively start owning and controlling things in your own community. Now, I've been through enough communities where folks are like, well, I got that now. And I sort of challenge them and I say, I don't think you do. If you don't have one of these mechanisms, and if you're not at these conversations where it's like, listen, we're going to build this affordable housing and this is the price, these are the amount of bedrooms, this is how we're going to do it, and we're going to do it collectively, and we're controlling it all, that's a different sense that your also property is going to also benefit from. Because right now, let's say you're a property owner and you have, maybe a few vacant buildings, or maybe you have a vacant piece of property next to you. I can tell you right now that that vacant piece of property is a drain on your property value. But if you put an affordable housing there, a brand new house built on there, or let's say it's not even a house, but you just improve that property, your property starts to increase in value maybe a little bit. Maybe it challenges you as a resident to step up your game in terms of your street, presence and stuff like that. There are a number of different things that will sort of benefit you as a resident, as to get involved in the community land trust, and then also to champion, because that's one of the things that we have seen throughout the creation of CLTs, is that a lot of folks like to complain. And a lot of folks like to complain about the bad things that are happening in their community. But if you can actually take ownership and actually create a mechanism to start doing some changes of those things, then why not? Stop complaining and actually start stepping it up and actually start to influence that change that's necessary. And that's what a CLT can possibly bring to the Russell community, is also that political power.
Perfect. So I have one last question. And this is one that I've heard from neighbors and just people in the community when talking through this. There seems to be, with some folks, a feeling for those who are interested in home ownership who haven't had that opportunity yet. There is a feeling with some folks that a CLT, I don't get real ownership. I don't really own it. Can you speak to that a little bit, or to speak to people who may feel that way?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I always love, and I actually, not too far from the Russell community, in actually Lexington, Kentucky, there's a CLT there. And a very wise leaseholder by the name of Kenneth Demas actually came down to Louisville one day and did a presentation with me about a CLT. And, this is, a very tall, African-American gentleman, has, some beautiful children, been a single father for most of his life. One of the residents asked him that and was like, but you don't own the land. And he just looked at him and he was like, do we ever? If we don't pay taxes, what happens to our property? People come and take our land, and he even went deeper to say, we also have to acknowledge that all the land that we're on right now is actually stolen land. We actually all shouldn't even own any of this land. And it harkens back to some of the work that I've done actually in New Orleans with one of the indigenous tribes, that's looked at the CLT model as they were doing a relocation. And they said, this is probably the most comparable to how our ancestors believed in land, is that it should never be singly owned. It should always be collectively owned, because we are all stewards of this earth and of this land, and that we should prosper from it. We should sort of, collectively sort of be enriched by it, but we should never singly own it. And, and one of the tribal chiefs said to me, he's like, it's like owning the sky. You couldn't ever think about owning a piece of the sky. So why are people thinking that they would own a piece of the land that stretches out so much? And he really, really challenged me to think about the colonialism that was sort of created our United States, that we were sort of founded and sort of prospered for many years on this idea of speculation. And one of the things that I believe that our founders, and I know at least from one of our founders that helped mentor me at an early age, helped me to realize that the reason why the Community Land Trust came out of that civil rights movement is the fact that they wanted to get back to the collective. They wanted to get back to, as what MLK started to talk about a lot in his speeches, that beloved community. And that it's actually no surprise that two of MLK's cousins, Slater King and oh God, I can't remember his other name, were actually the founders of this model. And that, it's fitting that this model started to talk about sort of that collective wealth of a community and how you can steward, millions of dollars of worth in land to actually leverage to get more resources into your own community. So for me, I always love to have folks think about things on a bigger scale. And even folks that have lived in CLT homes have always said to me, I feel more protected now in my home because I know that I have a community standing in back of me to protect my home than if I was living singly and owned my property. If I screw up, I screw up. If I screw up in a CLT, I got everybody else to lean on and help me through it. Versus if I'm singly just owning my house, then I'm at the whims of either the government or the bank, whoever wants to take my property first. So that's what I would say to folks that are, thinking about this idea of sort of ownership and not necessarily leaning into what has been, the colonialism of our society, and that we're actually trying to do something very different to actually keep our communities alive and thriving is by doing it in a very different way.
Man, I like that. Shoot, I got my first ever property tax bill this year, and I didn't like that. It was very uncomfortable. And I just I appreciate you answering the questions. I talked to Michael briefly before this, and he was like, you can throw whatever you want at Jason. You ain't gonna be able to catch him slipping. And he was right. He was right. I give it to him. So I'm going to pitch it to Maya to talk a little bit about the RPOP partnership pledge, which I signed. And I think anybody who loves and cares about Russell should sign that too. But yeah, take it away, Maya.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our live. Hey, Jason. Hey, Michael. Hey, Teresa. Thank you, Gabe. Can I share my screen? I have some language just to share with you all about the partnership pledge. My name is Maya White. I am the Senior Associate of Place of Promise Initiative. Russell Place of Promise. I do a lot of research and thinking through some of the programs and some of the things that we're trying to innovatively think through and introduce to the neighborhood, introduce to ourselves. One of our projects that we are very, very committed to is the partnership pledge. You've probably seen it in the chat already. You probably already come across it on our social media page. But as we're thinking about doing housing differently, thinking about doing community ownership differently in this space, talking about community land trusts, how do we collectively come together as a community? How do we think about what collective voice and collective what these different initiatives look like when we come together and do these things together. And so the partnership pledge is a guide for decision-making processes around investments, future strategies, policy and advocacy, community involvement. We wrote this with residents from the Russell for Russell Coalition for about a few months after we've, studied with them and built community with them and studied other policies and financial wealth building strategies with the community. We came up with the partnership pledge. And what it is a guide for these different ways of doing community and different ways of doing investments from now into 2023 when RPOP is being transitioned to residents to run and operate. When we say we, this is what we mean. The Russell for Russell Coalition, which is a group of 26 individuals who are residents in their neighborhood. We're talking about Russell residents in total, right? The 10,000 folks that live in the neighborhood. Our advisory board, Russell businesses, Russell Places of Faith, staff members of Russell Place of Promise, and community-based organizations in our neighborhood. For over the summer, we had met with these residents and created different value systems and principles of how we want to do partnership with folks in the Russell neighborhood. I'm sure there's a link going to the partnership pledge now so you can check it out as I'm talking. We also define what Black wealth is. So we are a justice-based initiative, RPOP, that is geared towards generating investments towards Black wealth building. We're very strategic and very distinct when we say Black wealth building, and we define that in the partnership pledge. What does that look like for us? How does it feel to have Black wealth? And that's just not monetary, but that is holistically, what does our health look like when it's in wealth? What does our community value look like when we talk about the wealth of our lives, right, as Black folks? That's a part of Black wealth building. And in this document as well, we are asking for this power sharing model. As we're thinking about future investors, people who are thinking about doing developments and strategies in Russell, how are you going to share that power with Russell residents? Russell residents are the #1 investors in Russell. You all live there, you breathe there, you take care of the land there. Either you rent it or you own it, right? Or if you just passing through or you're going to see a cousin in them, you are the #1 investor. So you should be a part of power sharing in the decisions that are being made around investments, future strategies, and community involvement. And so there's a power sharing model in there as partners are coming into the neighborhood. I want to get connected to Russell. They go through the partnership pledge and they say, we agree to this power sharing model with centering Russell residents. And so we have a goal, right? As we think about residents and people who are comrades of Russell residents signing onto the pledge. We want over 1,000 folks to sign it. This builds community power. It builds a collective voice, a shared community voice. This is some of the potential outcomes that we have, right? A power sharing model in practice, right? Not just saying this is what power sharing is, but as so many people are signing on to this, this is how we're doing it in practice with one another. This is how we protect our community from predatory and extractive investments. So many people have signed the pledge and it has so much weight because it has people power. Then people know they probably got to come through RPOP. They got to come through the residents to think about, but shoot, I want to be on 18th and Jefferson, but it looks like, we got some people to go through. So it has that community protection, and it also just centers residents in the decisions that are being made. Yeah, that's pretty much it. There's probably a link going in the chat on how to sign the pledge. You could read the thing in totality. But as we have explained, it's a guide, it's a document. It has beautiful language, and it has language from residents who have been sitting around and studying some of the things that we've talked about here today and that we're working towards as a community for tomorrow. So yeah, if you got any more questions, I'll probably go in the comment section, but I just wanted to share the pledge with you all, and thank you.
All right, so I will probably pitch it to either Ms. Jackie or Teresa, or I don't know if I should close it out, but I did just want to thank RPOP again, because I'm at all of y'all stuff all the time, and y'all do such a great job, and I just love y'all. And the fact that I'm on the stream today, like, this is cool. Like, I don't know, it's just wild for me to be the one on the stream because I've been to so many of y'all's things. And the same for you all at the Center for Neighborhoods. You all obviously do great things as well. Jason, I already told you, you handled yourself today, brother. You did that. So yeah, does anybody else have anything that they would like to share or add?
Gabe, I just want to say that we appreciate you and we're blessed to have you in the Russell community. Thank you for all that you do.
Oh, that coming from Mayor Miss Jackie. that is something else. And notice it's Mayor Miss Jackie. That's how you say it. But yeah, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Michael, Teresa, I want to close it out.
I want to throw in a quick plug for a couple of other things that are coming your way from RPOP. The first one is an overview of all the things that we're going to be working on in 2022. And you can tune in to our Facebook channel on Monday from 6 to 7 to hear me and my co-lead Cassandra Webb talk through all the things. And it is a lot of things. And the other thing I want to put in a plug for is that we have had so much great chat today on the Facebook, and I can tell that residents are super engaged in this conversation and really in the conversation about what's going on in your neighborhood, Russell. And so if you are a Russell resident and you're tuning in here and you are interested in continuing to talk with us about the future of Russell, a place of promise, and the work that we're doing in the neighborhood, please go to our website, russellpromise.com, and click on the opportunity to get involved in a work group. We have 2 work groups that are launching next month. One is focused on a question of what Russell, a place of promise will be when we grow up, when we grow out of our incubation stage. Community land trust is on our list. And so we're awfully interested in hearing from you about your interest in being part of this conversation. The other work group is focused on a 5-acre property across from the Sports and Learning Center. We affectionately call it the Madison Street property. And so the work group that focuses on that site will be talking about design and use and planning for the first phase of development. So lots of exciting things are happening in Russell. We are so excited to be part of the conversation that CFN is leading around community land trusts. And Michael and Jason, thank you so much for inviting us to be part of this tonight. It's been nothing but lovely. And so we're just looking forward to next steps. So tune in, join us. We can't wait to be partners.
All right, so next steps. Our next steps are really you all, right? It's really residents, it's really individuals within Russell sitting down together and having these conversations. Our next steps are really reaching out to you and you reaching out to us to participate. I hope that we were able to kind of sway some folk to start putting in the work into their neighborhood through the CLT. Right now, Jamel should be placing his email in the chat, and that will be your contact for us. But really, our next steps are to find those individuals who are really ready to stand up, put it in the work, and form a vision for a community land trust that will reflect the residents of Russell and also push the neighborhood to where you feel like it needs to be. All right. That is all I have. Thank you all.